How did the security failure on January 6th happen, and how do we ensure it does not happen again? Since the pipe bomb split the USCP posture and thereby facilitated the breach of the Capitol, we must begin with this issue. My first question is, why did a new team under Director Patel in just 2 months do what the FBI failed to do over 4 years with the exact same evidence? The answer appears to be a failure.
This may look like a routine oversight hearing, but it's actually a stress test of federal accountability. What's really being tested here is whether national security institutions respond to threats based on evidence or narrative convenience. This raises broader questions about how investigative priorities are set, how failures are addressed, and whether oversight bodies correct mistakes or quietly move past them. In this video, we'll break down how unanswered questions reveal deeper cracks in leadership, transparency, and institutional responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Romano, did you prosecute anyone related to January 6th for engaging in an insurrection?
No, Congresswoman.
I didn't think so. So Mr. Raskin's statement that someone was a convicted insurrectionist is actually inaccurate. Isn't that correct?
I wouldn't say it's inaccurate. Well, a convicted insurrectionist.
She wasn't a convicted insurrectionist, was she?
Would the gentlelady yield?
No, I will not. Mr. Romano.
Do you accept seditious conspiracy as insurrection?
Mr. Romano, I will reclaim my time. Mr. Romano, did you prosecute anyone for engaging in an insurrection related to January 6th?
For the crime of insurrection?
You did not, did
No.
you? This select subcommittee is committed to undertaking the investigation that the first select committee never conducted. How did the security failure on January 6th happen, and how do we ensure it does not happen again? Since the pipe bomb split the USCP posture and thereby facilitated the breach of the Capitol, we must begin with this issue. My first question is, why did a new team under Director Patel in just 2 months do what the FBI failed to do over 4 years with the exact same evidence? The answer appears to be a failure from the very start of the FBI's response. As a subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee that oversees the DOJ and FBI, it necessitates that we begin right here. According to what we have been led to believe, the pipe bombs were placed outside the RNC and DNC on the evening of January 5th. They allegedly sat there undetected for 17 hours before the device behind the RNC was discovered at approximately 12:38 p.m., with the device at the DNC immediately discovered thereafter at 1:05 p.m. The pipe bomb outside the RNC was discovered by Carlin Younger, who lived near the RNC and discovered the pipe bomb in the unmarked alley between the Capitol Hill Club and RNC while doing her laundry. She alerted the RNC security, who then alerted the authorities. Oddly enough, no one from the FBI contacted Ms. Younger. 2 days later, on January 8th, Ms. Younger had to proactively contact the FBI through an online tip to identify herself as the person who discovered the pipe bomb and to offer her assistance with the case because she had not yet been contacted by the FBI. Ms. Nance, or Mr. Nance, would you agree that it would be standard operating procedure and good investigative practice to interview all of the eyewitnesses?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be standard practice to make sure that you cast a broad enough net so that you're interviewing any witness that could possibly provide information with regard to the progress of the investigation.
Well, can you think of any reason as to why the FBI did not seek to immediately speak to the person who actually found the bomb?
Well, no, that's a problem. That's a question that needs to be answered. And does it go to lack of resources? I mean, that's still very, very early. So I find that to be extremely problematic.
Well, in her online tip, Ms. Younger stated, quote, "I can confirm that the device must have been placed between 12 p.m. and 12:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on January 6th, end quote, because it was not there when she first passed the area around 12 p.m. So when was the bomb actually placed and by whom? The FBI finally interviewed Ms. Younger 3 days later on January 11th, and it confirmed her testimony that the device outside the RNC was not there before 12 p.m. on January 6th. This leads us to 3 significant data points. First, the bombs had kitchen timers for 60 minutes. Second, the witness who first discovered the bomb noted it was not there before noon, about 60 minutes before the meeting of Congress. And third, if in fact the bombs were placed the night of the 5th, they sat there for 17 hours in a highly trafficked area, undisguised without detection until the most crucial time for security that day, which was when Congress was voting to certify the election. Mr. Nance, what should the FBI have done with this contradicting evidence?
Well, the Bureau should have run that all to ground. I mean, every resource should have been made available to make sure that, that those questions got answered, and that simply did not happen. And I think that had to do with a less than ideal leadership posture.
Well, I think that's the understatement of the century, Mr. Nance, but I appreciate your remarks on that. Both devices were largely undisguised and visible along heavily trafficked areas, yet they allegedly lay undiscovered for 17 hours, a point Ms. Younger disputes. And again, which oddly enough, they were not detected by the Secret Service bomb sweeps at the DNC before the arrival of then Vice President-elect Harris that very morning. Does the fact that these devices were not detected for 17 hours raise any questions for you?
Well, of course, I think it does for everybody. Though the January 6th investigation was just beginning, and I suppose you could make an argument that resources were stretched thin, the gravity of the placement of these, where these pipe bombs were placed, suggests that that should have received, at least the same or equivalent amount of resources that the broader J6 investigation.
Well, then I appreciate not only did it not receive the attention, the January 6th committee entirely ignored the placement of those bombs, which tells you that they had an agenda that they pursued that had nothing to do with what actually happened on January 6th. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired.
Mr. Chair, I have a UC.
The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Crockett, is now recognized.
Thank you so much. This is from the New York Times.
What we just witnessed in this hearing was not a clash of personalities or a routine exchange of talking points. It was a moment of exposure, a moment where Representative Harriet Hageman forced the record to confront a contradiction that has lingered in the shadows for years. When she pressed federal officials on whether anyone had actually been prosecuted for insurrection, the silence that followed spoke louder than any prepared statement. The certainty so often declared in headlines suddenly gave way to hesitation, deflection, and procedural language. And in that pause, the official story cracked. Hageman's focus was not rhetorical, it was precise. She returned again and again to one unresolved fact pattern: the unexplained placement of explosive devices outside the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters, devices that diverted security resources at a critical moment and were allegedly left undetected in one of the most heavily monitored areas in the nation. What mattered was not ideology, but competence. Not narrative, but evidence. She laid out the timeline carefully, almost clinically, revealing that a private citizen discovered one of these devices during an ordinary errand, and that federal authorities did not even contact her. Days passed, then more days. Only after she reached out on her own did investigators respond. That detail alone should have stopped the room. A witness at the center of a national security incident left waiting, unheard, uncontacted. In any serious system of justice, eyewitness testimony is sacred. It is pursued immediately, preserved carefully, treated as a priority. Here, it was ignored, and when pressed on why, no one had a convincing answer. As the hearing continued, another inconsistency emerged. The original claim suggested these devices had been placed the night before and remained untouched for 17 hours. Yet the witness stated clearly that the device was not present earlier that day. The timeline did not align, the physical evidence did not align, the basic logic did not align. And still, for years, the investigation stalled. What Hageman exposed was not merely an investigative failure, it was a failure of leadership, a failure of curiosity, a failure of urgency. When a new team was able to make progress in mere weeks using the same evidence that had sat dormant for years, the question was no longer whether answers were possible. It was why they had not been pursued. This moment matters because it reveals how power operates when accountability is optional. Institutions often demand trust, but trust is earned through transparency and competence. When agencies tasked with protecting the public cannot explain why obvious steps were not taken, confidence erodes. When committees tasked with oversight choose not to ask uncomfortable questions, suspicion grows. And when narratives are advanced without solid evidentiary grounding, the public is left with certainty without proof. The hearing also revealed something more subtle, but just as important. It showed how selective attention can shape history. Entire investigative bodies were formed, hearings held, reports issued, yet this pivotal event received little focus. Resources flowed elsewhere, lines of inquiry were narrowed, and a critical security breach was effectively sidelined. That is not how truth emerges. That is how truth is managed. In a functioning republic, justice is not supposed to be guided by convenience or political utility. It is supposed to be guided by facts, even when those facts complicate preferred narratives. Especially then. The refusal to fully reconcile contradictory evidence does not protect democracy. It weakens it, because every unanswered question becomes an open wound in the public conscience. Hageman's closing remarks cut to the core of this issue. If these devices were as visible and undisguised as described, if they sat in heavily trafficked areas without detection, if standard procedures were not followed, then the failure is not abstract. It is real, it is measurable, and it demands accountability. Not someday. Now. This hearing was not about relitigating the past for its own sake. It was about understanding how institutions behave under pressure, how truth can be delayed by inertia, and how narratives can harden long before facts are fully examined. It was a reminder that oversight is not an attack on government. It is a duty to the public. Moments like this are why these hearings matter. Not because they offer neat conclusions, but because they reveal unresolved tensions between power and responsibility, between authority and humility, between storytelling and evidence. The American system depends not on perfection, but on correction, on the willingness to admit mistakes, to reopen files, to follow evidence wherever it leads. When that willingness disappears, when questions are treated as inconveniences, the system drifts away from the people it is meant to serve. What we saw today was one lawmaker refusing to let that drift go unchallenged, refusing to accept vague assurances in place of clear answers, refusing to let time bury unanswered questions. And that is the deeper meaning of this moment. Democracy does not fail all at once. It erodes quietly, through neglected details and unanswered contradictions. It is preserved by those willing to slow the narrative down and ask again and again whether the story still holds. If you believe transparency matters, if you believe accountability should not depend on politics, if you believe the truth deserves persistence, support our work. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.